Hey, you, wherever you are in the world right now, thank you so much for being here with me. We know that we live in some volatile times and we know that the world is changing. So let's create a bridge as we travel together through one another's countries, removing all the labels, coming together as one people, finding our home in one world. And that's why our signature talk today, healing trauma and addiction through mindful practice, is so important. So please settle in as I welcome my guest speaker, Lisa McNett. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And Lisa comes to us as she's always been, a curious, aware observer, intrigued by human behavior. And in her effort to understand herself and heal from childhood trauma, Lisa committed herself to self exploration, self awareness, and self healing, and is dedicated to sharing her gifts to help others heal and live more fully and conscientiously. Lisa is passionate about inspiring people to connect with themselves and nature in nature in a profound way, which leads to deep healing and personal transformation. Through her healing journey, Lisa has become a licensed massage therapist. She does yoga, meditation, Reiki. She's a life coach. She's an ordained minister. And when she discovered breath work, she fully understood that the breath is the most powerful tool that we have to discovering who we truly are and transforming trauma into joy. And as this breath work practitioner, she works with clients individually and in groups, also online and in person. She also hosts some transformational workshops and retreats. Lisa, I love everything that you're doing to help the world heal. And I totally, on a very authentic, organic level, totally understand the healing process from trauma, from going through life's bumps and just these invisible barriers that kind of knock us on our feet and all of these different things that happen to us. But before we go into anything, anybody who's watching you right now, they can see that you're in a camper. So I think I'm going to address that first for our audience. Why are you in a camper?
Yeah. So during the lockdown that we were having here in Gainesville, Florida, my husband was still working because he was working at a hospital. He is essential. However, I was deemed non-essential, which was a big surprise. And so I was stuck in my house, and in my local area, all of the wildlife areas were closed. So I couldn't escape to nature at all. And I was really just stuck in my neighborhood. So even being in my backyard, I could see other houses, I could hear other people. I really need to be immersed in nature in order to really be okay. And the reason that we were living in Gainesville was really just to be near family. And so we evaluated, we really took the opportunity to evaluate where we want to be in life, and what our values are and what's truly important to us. And getting out into nature was that. And we wanted to go, we started talking about moving to the mountains maybe in a year or two, and it led to, no, we need to do something now. So especially in Gainesville, there's like a period of time, there's like a season for selling your house. So we were told you have to put your house on the market now if you want to sell it. So we said, okay, we put our house on the market now, and it sold within one day. So we weren't quite ready to move anywhere yet. We decided to buy a camper, an RV, and to make our life mobile. So here I am.
That is amazing. So you've got this gypsy soul and you're going to be traveling across the country, and that's really incredible. So nature is so profoundly important, I think, for everyone right now in the way of the world, and just being able to get out of our confined spaces. And even if we're in a confined space, I mean, just opening a window, allowing sunshine to come in, it's so important. But share with us a little bit how you got from where you were. I know, the title of your piece today is Healing Trauma and Addiction Through Mindful Practice. So tell us a little bit how you got onto this journey of healing, and where did that come from? What happened?
Yeah, I basically had a sort of a breakdown. I originally grew up in Miami, North Miami Beach, and so no nature. I grew up very much in a city environment and a very loud environment. My parents were hippies. My father was a musician, and so he played the electric guitar, he played the drums, and that stuff was in my living room all the time. So very loud, very noisy, very city oriented, and he was an alcoholic. My father, there were a lot of drugs around as well, and I was a sensitive, very sensitive child, and also always a fighter. So it's interesting. I was the sensitive child, and it was really hard to be in this loud, noisy, crazy environment, and it was a very violent environment. And so, yeah, I'm letting myself kind of go down a rabbit hole. So we'll see where the rabbit hole goes. Um, so, so I feel like, I never wanted to be anything like my parents. I never wanted to to drink. I never wanted to do any drugs. I thought a lot of that was the root of a lot of I knew that it was the root of a lot of the evils that were happening in my home was alcohol and other drugs. And so I mentioned that I've also always been a fighter. So for some reason, even though I was this sensitive child who wanted to hide away in the corner and who had a hard time speaking, I also, when my father would come, home after several days of being on a drinking binge, and would attack my mother, I would come out and be like, leave my mom alone. And I became sort of the person to receive all of that anger and that fury. And it was really confusing for me, one, why I would put myself in that situation instead of just go and stay in my bedroom and just let whatever happened out there happen. And then two, why I wasn't protected by my mother and why she allowed these things to happen. And so, I say that just because there's always been there was this sort of duality or duplicity within me of this fighter who wanted things to be different or who wanted to stand up against things that I felt were wrong, but also I was allowing myself to, to be stuck in a place of either exposing myself to or doing things that didn't feel right, if that makes sense. So growing up in this loud and abusive and violent space led to an adult who took on a lot of these addictions. When I was a teenager, we moved from Miami after both of my grandparents had passed away on my father's side. He decided that we needed to get out of the city and go to the country. And so he found this place. It's actually where I am right now. I've come full circle. Healing happens in circles, and so we'll come back to that. But he found this tiny town called Bell, Florida, which is like 45 miles west of Gainesville, Florida. And the next thing I knew, we were moving from Miami out to this teeny tiny town where there were 48 people in my 9th grade class. And there were cows around, and there were woods, and there was nature. And I was terrified. I was terrified. Can you imagine, like, somebody, growing up in the city? A city would be terrifying, right? But no, I had never experienced quiet before. I had never experienced silence before. And I didn't know how to handle all of that. So the interesting thing for me is that, I was a pretty good kid growing up in Miami. Again, that quietness, that really fear of everything. I say that, surprising myself, because I for some reason wasn't afraid of my father. Anytime I get pushed against a wall, anytime I get backed up against a wall, I feel like that's when something activates within me that has to take action. So, I think I was a good kid in Miami. I was shy, and I stayed to my small group. But then when we moved to the city, or to the country, I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any outlet. I didn't fit in. I was made fun of. I had always been made fun of anyway, because I was poor, and when you growing up poor is a trauma in itself. I don't, being hungry and not knowing when I'm going to get a meal, or if I'm going to get a meal, that does something to a person itself. So let me reel myself back in. How did I get to where I am now? Yeah, when we moved out to the country, when I got a job washing dishes at a restaurant, my mom brought me to work, and she said, okay, you need to start working. You need to make some money. And that money was coming in to help feed everybody and to pay bills. And the restaurant owner's daughter over the summer was working there as well. And she asked me, she started making friends with me and talking to me. And she asked me, do you have a curfew? When's your curfew? And I said, well, I don't have a curfew. And so now I was her friend. Well, the reason I didn't have a curfew is because I didn't have any friends. But when high school started, she wanted to start spending the night at my house and inviting people to spend the night at my house. And so here I was now at 15 years old. And what people do out in the country is they go out and they drink. And so, nobody was paying attention to me. I had to help take care of my brothers. But as far as my parents go, my mother was absent because she was working all the time, 2 jobs. And my father was absent, just mentally and drunk. And, so nobody was paying attention to what I was doing. And so now here I became, in order to fit in, I started drinking. And I wanted, that's something about me, is I always need to be the best. Like I was kind of driven to like prove myself, not be the best, but to prove myself. So I had to prove that I could drink a lot. And so I have to be like one of the guys, and I have to be tough, and I had to be strong. Like these were all side effects of my trauma, of course, that I know now. But then it was like, like I had to have this armor of like, I'm the strongest, I'm the toughest, I can drink the most. So fast forward to 2006, and I'm a nightclub manager. I manage a dueling piano bar in Chicago, and I'm a complete functioning alcoholic. I'm in a job where it's nightclub. So, so having a party lavish lifestyle was not only acceptable, but it was welcome. And I was working 60, 70 hours a week. I hardly ever slept. I hardly ever ate. And, and I got to the point where I had started drinking while I was working too, which, you don't do that. You work at nightclub. So I never wanted to be like my parents. I saw the self-destruction of my father with alcohol, and I saw all of the unhealthy patterns that my mother had and other family members had from stress and from overeating or from not eating right and from having a lifestyle of overworking. And somehow here I was. I was approaching 30 years old, and I knew I was going to die by the time I was 40 or 45 if I kept going in this way. And a few other things happened. Chicago winter, my fourth one, I got pneumonia. The winters are depressing enough. I went through a breakup, somebody I had been in a relationship with 3 years, and some things had kind of gone bad with my job, and I stopped sleeping. I literally stopped sleeping. I didn't sleep for like 4 days at all. I would just lay in bed, and something really starts happening to the mind when you don't sleep for 4 days. And so I called my doctor and I asked her for sleeping pills. I said, can you just give me like a week's worth of sleeping pills? I don't want to get addicted to these things, but I just need a couple nights of sleeping. And she said, well, no, you can't have a week's worth. I'm going to give you a month's worth. But I was, tuned in and intelligent, and that fighter I had inside me kicked on and was like, okay, no, enough is enough. Like, this is your wake-up call. And so use these sleeping pills mindfully to start sleeping again, and let's start making some new decisions and some different choices for yourself.
So that is a lot.
Yeah. Sorry.
So no, it's good. It's good. So I want to go back to a couple of things that you started with. And one of the things that you talked about is just, as a little girl, you were living in this space of, it almost sounds like noisy, chaotic, space where everything was just loud, and it's almost like you weren't allowed to have the quiet, which is why when you were in this silence that you briefly spoke about, it was so uncomfortable, right? And I just wondered, when you were in that silence and that space and that discomfort, how did you handle that?
The first thing that comes to my mind is the truth. I handled everything by escaping through books.
Okay.
Or through reading books, through reading and through writing, reading and writing. Reading was always my refuge. I don't know at what point that started, but so I would just find a quiet nook. I would go to a quiet, wherever it was, and I would just read. And I started being able to appreciate the quiet because I had a book with me, or because I had a journal with me, and I was able to write. And I would just either, lots of journaling about how horrible my life was. And then also I would write poetry, and I wanted to be a writer. So I would make up stories about people as well. And so those were the things that I did.
Yeah, and as a child, I'm sure that was probably the thing that you could control too, because it was something that was easy to be able to get your hands on and utilize. And writing is so therapeutic for anyone that is releasing trauma from their body, just to help it, help them move it through the body. So it's great that you were
Absolutely.
able to do that for yourself. But it's interesting to hear your story, how you go from this peaceful kind of place, and yes, it's uncomfortable, but then you talk about being a nightclub manager where you're back in that chaotic state, but that's something that you just always lived in. So you were probably comfortable in that space too, because that's what you knew as a little girl, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's the really strange thing about it is, I'm so grateful to that time when we moved out to the quiet space in the country because I had that exposure to that. And I at a young age, and I wasn't quite ready to live in that space for long term then. And part of my leaving was I wanted to, at some point when I was 17, my parents got a divorce. And I have a brother who is 13 years younger than me. And so really from the time my brother was born, I was his second mom. I really, especially with my mom working so much, which she had to do to support us, but it was also part of her avoidance, mechanism. um, but so I have a brother who's 4 years younger than me. I had this brother who was 13 years younger than me. So I had to care for them. And again, as I said, I started working, washing dishes, and that money was going you know, towards bills. And so as soon as I was 18, I left and I went to Gainesville, the big town 45 miles away. And I was there for a couple of years, but I really wanted to get as far away from my family as I possibly could. And I wanted to get back to a city because I felt like a city was an exciting place to be. And I missed. It's interesting looking back on one's life, right? So we left Miami, and that was a traumatic thing because that was where all my friends were. There was so much life happening. There were so many opportunities that are not existent out in the country. And so I wanted to go back where there was life and opportunities. And yeah, one thing led to another, and here I am in hospitality and in a live music venue. And again, it's that really interesting duality of like, oh, this is everything that I hate, but here I am because yes, it is comfortable, and it really is known. um yeah.
So when you're in this space, you talk about you're managing this nightclub, you're drinking at work, which is not something that you should be doing, and you know this, and you're becoming an alcoholic. So was your rock bottom the point that you're not able to sleep? Is that your rock bottom, or did you have another rock bottom time that really changed the course to go towards healing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that was the rock bottom, but that was after other rock bottoms. That was after other rock bottoms. So I went through a period where I was doing a lot of drugs, and I would say I'm really grateful and fortunate that I feel like um, I was able to get off of the drugs, and that wasn't the thing that really continued. I mean, not that alcohol is great, but I was doing some really I was doing cocaine. I was doing crystal meth when I was living in San Francisco for a while, and I found myself in a few really bad situations, and I found myself crawling and asking for help. One very specific time is actually after uh, the Twin Towers fell, September 11th, 2001. It's the wildest thing. I was living in San Francisco. I was not in management at that point. I was just waiting tables and bartending. And I was in a relationship with this guy who was from Ireland. And when I got into a relationship with this guy, he was just big into cocaine. And so now I'm big into cocaine and, doing some other drugs as well, and marijuana and drinking. So I'm drinking every day. I'm doing cocaine all the time. And we were going to drive to Mexico, and we were going to just go down into Mexico and drive all through Mexico and Guatemala and explore. And literally we were going to leave on September 10th. On September 12th, excuse me. Yeah, we were going to leave on September 12th. September 10th was my last day of work. That's why that's a significant day. So September 10th was my last day of work at the restaurant. And then September 11th, those Twin Towers fell. And so we couldn't, Mexican borders closed. We weren't going anywhere. And I didn't have a job anymore. And I realized that I was so far away from my family. Like, this was such a big event, such a big thing that happened. And I couldn't connect through to my family to even speak with them because all of the lines were bogged up. And I got scared. And my family, my two brothers, I love them so much. And my mother, I love her as well, even though I had this sort of love-hate relationship with her because I felt like she should have protected me, whereas now I understand that we all really do the best that we can. And so I understand her perspective more now, but this, child aspect didn't understand why my mother didn't protect me. So I had this love-hate relationship with her, but I realized how far away from my family I was and that I really did love them. So I took a train 4 days from California to Florida. And when I got there, I was like, okay, look, I need to go into rehab. I have this really big problem, and my mom was like, you're fine. You'll grow out of it, so, so I ended up going back to California, right? And fortunately, I didn't end up going to Mexico. We stayed in the US, but I had to go through some more dark situations, and I crawled myself up and out of the drugs. And so that stopping sleeping, that was like the last rock bottom.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
a lot to go through. I mean, just going through rehab is a lot, all these moves, that's back and forth that you're doing across the country. I mean, there's so much there. But during this time, I mean, did you have a relationship with a higher power? I mean, was there any time that you could say like, okay, because one thing that I often hear people say is they question that idea of a higher power. And especially if they're experiencing a lot of trauma or they're in a state where they're using vices just to get through life. So did you have any presence of a higher power that was, alongside you in this process?
So I would say at some point, looking back now, I would say the whole time. Looking back now in complete retrospect, I would say the entire time. However, as a child, especially as a young child, I it's this duality piece again. I wanted to believe in a higher power, and I wanted to believe that there was a God. And at the same time, it was so hard for me because I didn't know how a God would let the things happen to me that were happening to me. So I questioned, how can there be a God wouldn't let these things happen to me, these atrocities. God would protect me, But at the same time, I felt like, well, to question God is like a dangerous thing. Like, I really, really wanted there to be one. And so what's interesting is that I always had an inner voice. I always had an inner guidance. I always had a self-protective mechanism, and I always had intuition. I did not always listen to the intuition, right? In fact, it can be really hard to listen to the intuition and to listen to what's right. dealing with some of these things, especially with addictions. The addiction can take over. However, so that intuition, those inner voices, right? That is a higher, that I came to understand and to learn that that is a higher power.
Yeah. And I mean, if you were your little girl self today, what would your advice be for her? Like, what would you have told her?
Yeah, she probably wouldn't believe anything that I would say, right? But to really one, to stop and to take some breaths, to slow down and to just take some nice, deep, slow breaths every time that she feels angry or that she feels stressed out or that she's wondering and questioning everything, just to stop and take some nice, slow, and deep breaths and to try to connect with or have a little bit of faith that this is really only a season of her life.
Yeah. And did you feel like you were alone, or did you feel like you weren't alone? Like how
So
did you
alone.
feel? You felt alone. So
Completely alone. Completely alone.
I guess when you were talking earlier about how could God put you through this, what would your answer be as an adult?
Yeah, so my answer, we're going to go a little woo-woo. Yeah, my belief as an adult is that that I am a soul, that I am a soul that is much bigger than this human life. And that I really came into the family that I came into and the body that I came into and this existence and this timeline with the understanding that I was going to move through some major, major, major challenges in order to overcome those and to grow and in order to understand. It's to meet just greatness, to find God, to understand, to help to help not only myself but to help so many other people come through those dark days, to help so many other people, yeah, they're really a part of the process to finding something greater. So I feel like when somebody goes through life with like everything is sort of mediocre, there's really no challenges, no real trials or tribulations. They also can't really experience as much joy and as much excitement and really as much expansiveness and as much love, right? The through the process of trauma and of like just complete bleakness and feeling like I want to die. The other side of that is being able to connect with how much I want to live and how much life is beautiful.
Yeah. I think that is so profound what you just said, the stark contrast of wanting to live because you understand how close you came to dying. And it is so profound in so many ways that I do believe that a lot of people do take life for granted because they don't understand that duality to the degree that people who have gone through addiction or trauma or chronic illness, these various things of life that we are handed, and literally, it's part of our journey, but it does give us a different kind of appreciation for the life that we do live. And
Yes.
I wonder, Lisa, with this process of your journey, how do you, so, how do you go through this traumatic childhood, you go through this alcoholism, you have your breaking point where you're making a decision to completely change your life and take it into a more holistic avenue where things are completely different. And it's literally like beautiful to see you in an RV right now having this conversation, because it just goes to show you went from, this chaotic city to this, peaceful country, like literally, and here you are in this peaceful country kind of state. So how do you talk to healing trauma, healing addiction? Like, what are some of the things that people can really take away as far as understanding this healing process?
Yeah, so is that it is a process. It's very much a process, and it takes a lot of time. And through the process, it's like a tango. It can be like a tango. We kind of move forward and we go back. And through this sort of pendulation of taking a few steps forward, we gain inner resources and we gain tools in order to further strengthen when we fall back again, we can get really, really hard and really down on ourselves. And so, but every time that we come out of that darkness, we acquire new tools. And so for me, and so it was 2006 where I had that like sort of breakdown. And so my choice from there was to get to move back to Florida, get a job, at a resort, which was going to be less hours and easier. And I had been exposed to yoga and I had been exposed to meditation before. And so those were practices that were helpful, but that I didn't stick to. So I decided now, okay, I'm going to try these practices every day and see what happens. And so I started practicing yoga 5 days a week and spending time. I moved to the beach, just spending time walking on the beach and just being in silence on the beach. And that was my meditation. And I would just cry and I would journal and I would just cry and I would practice yoga and I would cry and I would be like, why am I crying? What's happening? And I knew something bigger was happening, when I was practicing yoga. And I, before I took this job, I had decided I need to go over to Asia and just meditate in caves. I had been writing that in my journal since like 1994. Go to Asia, meditate in the caves. Go to Asia, meditate in the caves. I go back and I look and it's like, and so, but I didn't listen to that voice. And so, I guess what I want to say is there's so many things I want to say, but, starting to let go of the ideas of who we're supposed to be and the things that we're supposed to be doing and just listen to that inner voice. Because that inner voice is going to help lead you to what is going to be healing for you personally. And what is healing for everyone personally is time in nature, silence in nature, and breath, meditation, and somatic therapies. That's where we store things in the body.
Yeah, and a lot of trauma is really stored on that cellular level, so that yoga, just the mind and body connection, is so key, which is why you were crying, because your body's remembering trauma. Exactly. And even though you don't know why you're crying because you're literally detoxing your body from all this trauma that you went through. So that makes perfect sense. For people that are listening to you today, I mean, do you have any kind of, quick tidbit kind of healing tool that you can offer to the audience that would help them as far as just, bringing them into a state that's going to give them some calm or some sort of suggestions. I know around the world, it's just been such a chaotic period of time for everyone, and people are suffering.
Yeah.
People need some support and some, tools as far as helping them. Do you have any to offer,
Yes.
Lisa?
Absolutely. And that's, again, my journey started with yoga, but it ended with it started with yoga and meditation and then went to massage and deep tissue massage and all of these different physical things, but it's ended with breath work. And what I found with breath work is that breath work is really the only tool that we need, because breath work works on a cellular level. And if we allow the breath, when we breathe consciously, we can allow the breath to connect with us, different physical sensations in the body, emotional sensations in the body, and to allow those come to the surface. And so we can become a little bit more free. And so I can show you, we can do 10 breaths right now if you'd like.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So I'll give a little disclaimer just because, breathing, we all breathe. However, this can be an intense process for some. 10 breaths is pretty safe for anybody. However, there are some contraindications for this breath practice, and so it's just things that you want to be mindful of. So if you have bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or a history of really fragmenting from your mind, don't necessarily do this without a practitioner, without a guide, or more than just a few breaths, but you can still consciously breathe through your nose.
What about people have like any kind of illness or chronic conditions, anything like that?
Yeah, more so just hypertension, glaucoma, the pressure in the eyes, or prone to fainting. Or, of course, if you're in an early stage of pregnancy or have a history of miscarriage, those would be the other things to be mindful of.
Okay.
Yeah. So conscious connected breath work we're breathing in and out through the mouth, and we're focusing on the inhale. So that inhale is really bringing in a lot of oxygen into the body, and then letting the exhale drop. And we're breathing in a circular motion, so there's no pause between the inhale and the exhale. And when we do this, there's no right way and there's no wrong way. So I say that because people oftentimes think, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? We let the breath, the difference between yogic breathing and breath work as a healing modality is in yogic breathing or pranayama, we are controlling the breath. And so even with trauma in the history or just in general, most of us want to control things. And so this is, yoga and yogic breathing is a way of even controlling how far we're willing to go with letting our healing happen. So when we let go of control of the breath and just let the breath go in the pattern and where it needs to go, it hits the subconscious and it goes where it needs to go. And so we'll have this experience, but you can have new insights into things, new awareness, an old memory might pop up. Again, an emotion might come, a thought might come. All sorts of different things can happen. The body might want to start to move, or we might want to start to stretch. And this is all, again, if we do a longer breath session, but let's just take 10 breaths and we can see how much that in itself can transform. So mouth will get a little bit dry. I'll show you what it looks like. I like to say to take the breath into the back of the throat. That bypasses the tongue a little bit. And it looks like this. Okay. Feel ready?
We're ready.
Okay, so you can let's just stretch the mouth. Ah. Just to get over that awkward feeling of opening the mouth, right? And then let's take an exhale together. And then let's open the mouth wide for that first breath in. It can feel a little unnatural. And if you feel like you're suppressing a yawn, let the yawn out. So let's just sit for a minute, because you probably notice you feel a little different.
That is incredible. I could feel it way down in my chest.
Yeah. I know I put you on the spot and shared that, but you feel like I feel tingly. I feel a little lightheaded just after the 10 breaths. And so you might feel a little activation. So those 10 breaths just help shift your consciousness, shift your perspective, and then just sit with that after. So we can also just breathe in and out through the nose. I can offer another breathing technique that is not this one, but this is the main modality that I work with. And I will take, a really great practice for the listeners, if they're willing to and open to journal, is 28 breaths, 25 to 30 breaths, and then just free write. About 28 breaths and then just free write. And that's an interesting process of connecting with your subconscious, opening a channel, if you will, and then through the writing, just allowing something to come through, whatever that is. And if you're not willing to write, that's fine. Sit in a quiet space and just notice what thoughts pop up as well.
So is that 20 breaths? Is that just like a normal breathing technique, or is that?
Well, it would be 28 breaths like we just did, the conscious
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that's the same thing.
The same thing. Okay. And if the conscious connected breath is, if it's contraindicated for you, or if it's just something too far out there, something you're just unwilling to try, we can do nose breathing. The thing about the conscious connected breath that you probably experienced is that it really helps to bypass the mind. So through consciously breathing through the nose as well, we just need to make a little bit more effort to bypass the mind.
It's harder to breathe through the nose, is what you're saying.
Well, I'm saying we always breathe through our nose. So we take it for granted a little bit. So in order to consciously breathe through the nose, some tips and tricks for consciously breathing through the nose would be slow down the breath And how can you become more aware of your breath? So notice the breath, the temperature of the air as you breathe inside your nostrils. And notice the temperature of the air inside your breath as you breathe out through your nostrils. So now you're noticing that it's a cool breath as you breathe in, and a warmer breath as you breathe out. And you can start to also notice, where in my body am I breathing into? What parts of my body move? Am I breathing into my chest? Or am I breathing into my belly? Are there any physical sensations I'm aware of while I breathe? And if there are, we can breathe into those physical sensations. And that in itself is a powerful tool, because we oftentimes want to avoid pain. And that's why we go to addiction, we go to alcohol, we go to things by wanting to avoid pain, physical or emotional. And what we need to do is pay attention to our physical and or emotional pain. And that can be a challenge. And so we can do that gently with our breath. Like, just start breathing into that discomfort in the shoulder and just give it your full attention. Give it your breath. Let the breath bring some air into it. And start to notice, what does that pain feel like? Is it sharp? Is it dull? Is it throbbing? Does it stay the same? Does it start to move? And through that inquiry and with that breath, emotion might start to move. Thoughts will definitely come. Anger about the pain or ideas about the pain, but also through giving it the attention of the breath and the mind, we start to see it in a different way than we normally do, than when we're just trying to avoid it.
That makes perfect sense. And I know I've talked to several people who have talked about the mind and the body connection and how they visualize their internal space of where they're feeling the pain. So just calling awareness, is that pain sharp? Is it dull? Whatever that is. I know there's so much power to that in healing, especially the trauma on a cellular level, because everything is held in the body in that space. So this is absolutely amazing, Lisa. And thank you for sharing this with the audience, because if there's anyone out there listening and they need, a technique to help them, this is definitely something that can help them. With anyone listening in the audience, if you are contemplating suicide or if you're struggling with addiction, please reach out to your community for support. Get as connected to your community as you can so that you can take the steps necessary to heal yourself and get to a better place. And Lisa, thank you so much for the time today. So filled with gratitude and appreciation. Thank you. Thank you. And I wanted to ask you one last question. If I were to find your earth angel feather on the ground and I were to pick it up, what would your message to the world be?
Yeah, my message is that anything and everything really is possible. Anything and everything really is possible. It sounds cliche, but it really is only our mind and the limitations that we place on ourselves, of course, that we are not aware that we have placed on ourselves, that keep us restricted from being more, having more, doing more.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us today, Lisa. It's been a pleasure. And I'm just, like I said, filled with gratitude that you can share this space with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I love sharing the breath and the power of the breath. I'm so passionate about it, and And I am touched I'm touched and I'm grateful for you that you have created this platform and that you are working to reach people who are really at the end of their rope, and just stopping and taking 10 breaths, however you do that, can help you to find even just the smallest glimmer of hope and the courage to reach out to somebody for help. And so that's my request and my prayer for you if you are somebody struggling with suicide or feeling at the end of your rope and hopelessness, is that you'll just stop and take those breaths to help you find that courage, because there's so much more waiting for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you again, Lisa. It's been a pleasure. And that's all we have time for today. This is Catherine Daniels with Retreat to Peace, reminding you to live your authentic life with peace. And as always, retreat to peace. We'll see you next time. Don't forget to join us next week when I bring back Jackie to interview as she shares her moving and gripping testimony of being sexually abused and how she handled her journey moving forward. This is a powerful, powerful story that she wanted to bring out into the light and share with her church, and her church had said no. For the next week plus, I would love for you to be part of this journey of survival. And there's so many people around the globe that have been impacted by abuse of various forms, but sexual abuse in particularly leaves lasting scars. And part of this process, we are going to provide a lot of healing and ways that you personally can take control of your own healing. So please join us. And I encourage you, if you know anyone who's been touched by this, encourage them to join us as well. Have a beautiful week. This is Catherine Daniels, and as always, retreat to peace.